In the mid 1970s in the United States, there was a movement to challenge the power and the importance of the institutions. And a man named Wolf Wilsonberger was central to that challenge of the power of institutions. He did some of the very first work in the United States, bringing people back out of the state institutions and back into their home communities, and he did that work in Omaha, Nebraska. One of the things that Wolf noticed was that although people had come back into their own communities, had been brought back from the big state institution, that they were closer at hand, if you will, to their home community, but they were no closer in heart or at heart to people who lived in the community. So he felt like there needed to be a mechanism that would intentionally bring people closer to one another and ask people to intentionally think about forming relationships with people who have been excluded, marginalized, if you will. So that was one of his rationales. The other was that he came to believe that all systems, not just the big bad evil institutional system, but that all systems had certain biases and had certain limitations, and that it would be important to have an independent, freestanding, voluntary person who was free from conflict of interest, connected to an individual person who depended on a system for their daily life and for their care. The third thing that Wolf believed was that or question that he was trying to answer was parents would come up to him at conferences and that sort of thing, as I understand it, and ask him the age-old question, which is, what'll happen to my child when I die? And he imagined and conceptualized, if you will, citizen advocacy really based on these three experiences. One, people coming back from the state institutions into their home communities but not being very well welcomed as people. The idea that all systems need to be monitored from the outside by people who are free from conflict of interest. And the third leg on the stool was this idea that as people's parents aged, it would be important to have other people in the communities who knew people and had an intention to be concerned about and be involved with them over long periods of time. In Georgia, we chose to use citizen advocacy as an approach, as a response to the federal government's, the United States government's mandate that every state, all 50 states in Georgia, have what was called a Protection and Advocacy Office. In 49 states, those turned out to be primarily legal advocacy organizations. In Georgia, a different decision was made, and so the idea was to invest in citizen advocacy. And so we started in 1978 and with a clear commitment to invite Georgians, tax-paying Georgians, citizens, to step closer to people that had been pushed aside and to use their citizenship muscles, their common sense, their passion, and their persistence on behalf of individual people. Early in that planning, there was the belief, the understanding that if people couldn't see one another as equals, or if people couldn't find the humanity in one another, it really wouldn't matter how many lawyers were hired, it wouldn't matter how many caseworkers were hired, it wouldn't matter how many regulations were put in place, that the real challenge and opportunity was for people to find ways to, rather than see each other as the other, to begin to find ways to see one another as brother. And so, again, the idea of relationship building built right in to the idea of protecting people and advocating for people. It's interesting that many people who have a disability are seen sometimes in three very familiar ways. One way people are seen sometimes is a problem, and many times that's kind of a social worker's perception, because you go see the social worker when you have a problem. In the United States, sometimes people are seen as a project. A Sunday school class will be invited to adopt someone and help someone in a way, and so that's kind of the Sunday school class's project is a person's need. And then the other way that people get seen is as patients, because the medical model continues to be so strong. I mean, in citizen advocacy, we're just asking people to try to find ways to see one another as people. And so we try to be really careful with our language and with our thinking to avoid, for